Welcome to UX South Bay, live from smoky and warm South Bay area and Santa Cruz and all around. This is meetup number 28. Normally when we are in person, we clap and cheer for this event. And we are so glad that you are watching today. We usually meet in person at the Google Cloud campus, but circumstances arose where we are doing this from our homes. So welcome to our homes. This is your meetup. Please suggest new topics, volunteer to speak, volunteer to be a community member. Every single person that is involved in this meetup does this in their spare time. And we just love to do it for the community. I want to thank our awesome sponsors here. We have Tech Systems, Sketch, and Google. If you haven't joined our Slack group already, do join our Slack group. Be aware that the link up here, the bit.ly link, is case sensitive. On our Slack group, we'll post links to the meetup event. We'll post job openings, and you can chat with each other about design. We also have a link for volunteers. This is a form. This one is also case sensitive. If you are interested in supporting the community, particularly right now, we need help with outreach and with finding speakers. Please definitely do that. And now it is time for our Sketch license giveaway. And I want to give a shout out to Sketch, who has been a longtime sponsor of this meetup. And this is their 10th birthday. I think that was yesterday. And so congratulations, Sketch, for 10 big years. And usually we would pull names out of a hat in a dramatic fashion, but instead we're going to use a JavaScript randomizer and show a banner to congratulate Sue, Jessica, Hitesh, and Jana on winning. I will reach out to you on meetup.com to help you collect your licenses. And now I'm going to ask Megan to join us. Hello, Megan.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining our meetup tonight. I wanted to introduce myself really quickly. I'm with Tech Systems Digital. We're a design agency here in the Bay, and we also help place designers with top teams in the area. So if you are interested in getting connected with one of our specialized design recruiters, please fill out the Google form. It's located in the banner, or it's also located on our Slack channel. And one of our recruiters will reach out to you to get connected. Along with who's hiring, we are hiring. We have several openings for our product designer needs. So make sure to fill out the Google form if you want to learn more. And if you yourself are hiring, please comment your team, what you're hiring for, where you're located, so the rest of the community can reach out.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, I want to introduce Kelly to talk about design at Google.
I sort of jumped in on you, Aaron. My apologies. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Thompson, and I lead part of the recruitment team in UX here, typically in the Mountain View office. I'm currently sitting in sunny Los Angeles, and really excited to be with you all here for number 28. So I have shared a doc with Aaron, and it's an opportunity for you to know if you're interested in being considered for opportunities here at Google. We have a workshop of sorts that we run every so often that talks a little bit about our process and how to successfully navigate the Google interview process. So if that is something that you're interested in, please, please, please sign the form that he'll provide, and we would love to have you and answer some of your questions and help you better understand how to prep and successfully sort of tackle the interview process that's notorious here at Google. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, next month we are going to continue our career series, and we are going to have Yancy Wu speak. She is a experienced designer. She's going to talk about new beginnings, those times in your lives where you're contemplating either moving to a new area or transitioning to a new career, and how to tackle that and how to think through that with a human-centered perspective. And I'm really looking forward to that talk. And right now, I would like to welcome Abi Jones. She is a UX manager at Google, and she is going to be talking to us tonight about why to throw away your 5-year plan. So please welcome Abi.
Hey there. Thanks for having me out, Aaron. And thanks everyone for being here tonight. First of all, before we get started too far along, I want to have a bit of a disclaimer. The things I'm going to talk about here tonight are things from my own life, and they don't represent the views or like future financial considerations for Google. Other things I'll be covering are time travel and spaceships, theoretical underpinning for this conversation, a little bit about Taco Bell, your team, strangers, and saying yes. So as we go through each of these areas, we have a lot to cover tonight. First of all, though, I want to recognize that I'm thankful for each of you taking this time out of your evening. Things are pretty tough out there for a variety of reasons. And so first, you just deserve congratulations for being here and thinking about what you might be looking for in your life and figuring out the next things you need to do. This is not a normal time for anybody. And so my hope is that this gives you a chance to pause, to reflect, and to figure out where you want to go next. So to escape 2020, I want to take you back to 2018. In 2018, I had just started a new role at Google. I was managing a small team. And as part of a portion of required manager trainings, I had to log into an online learning system we have at Google and take a few courses. And when I logged into the system, I noticed that there was an option to see a goal that I had previously put as one of the goals for my career. And I had written down that I wanted to be the VP of Design for Google Education. This was a goal I'd set back in 2013 when I had just come back from maternity leave, and I was feeling pretty aimless and wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. But sitting down at the computer and starting out on this new job, I took one look at that goal and just deleted it because I knew it wasn't what I wanted and it wasn't the place I wanted to go next. I have no intention to be the VP of Design for Google Education. And when I look at Google Classroom today, it doesn't fit the things that I want or imagine for my career in any way. And so what I didn't realize at the time was that the training that I'd been getting in terms of how to plan my career was really oriented around long-term planning that didn't fit the opportunities I really had in my life. One of the questions that I got from my manager in 2013 was asking me about the things I wanted to accomplish in the next 5 to 15 years. And I have to admit that when I take a step back from where I am right now and I look at what's possible in the world and I think about what I want to accomplish in the next 5 to 15 years, most of my brain is thinking about flying cars because that's what it seems like is going to happen in 2035. And then when I have to think about what my own career looks like in 2035, in this 5 to 15 year time span, I realize it's kind of narrow. I think about a self-driving or self-flying car, and then I think, wow, I guess I could design the interfaces for a flying car. And I realize that I'm not thinking broadly enough, that I actually, even though I make imaginative and creative things every day, that I don't have the understanding or imagination or the feeling of opportunity that's going to be present in 2035. And that's why I'm here with you today, to remind you that the goals that you set for yourself, that 5-year plan, is actually creating a limit for what you can do in the future. And so instead of creating this limitation or creating a space that you don't really want to go in or shouldn't go in, we're going to think about how to generate and act on possibility instead. When I made that 5-year plan, I was really just relying on my past and telling myself a story that I already knew. See, back in the year 2000, I'd been a museum educator. In 2002, I was a 3rd grade teacher. In 2005, I worked on teacher certification systems, my first design job. In 2008, I got a master's degree in instructional design. And then even in 2010, when I was working at MySpace, I was a classroom volunteer. And so in 2013, working at Google Education seemed to make a lot of sense, but I was creating a goal that didn't have any connection to what was actually possible at Google and what could actually happen in my life. I sold myself short. I was so wrong. And so what I didn't realize at the time was my life was about to change dramatically. In 2013, my son was hospitalized, changing everything that I knew about parenting. In 2015, I realized that Google search was the wrong place for me to be, and I quit my job there. In 2017, the place I'd started working also ended up closing down, and so I had to find a new role after that. I went over to the security and privacy group and worked on GDPR, and then co-founded a project within Area 120, Google's internal startup incubator. And I quit that too, and eventually found my way to managing a team in Google's research and innovation group. None of these were things that I could have predicted in 2013, just the way that 2 years ago, I could not have predicted what 2020 would be like. There is a path that I thought I'd set for myself, and instead I felt like I had been taking detours that all led me to a place that's better than I could have possibly imagined. What I realized, in part through the help of a friend, was that I was always looking for something interesting. And when one of my friends first told me that she observed this about me, I felt kind of insulted. Like, wow, really? You think that I can't figure out what I want to do next or where I'm going to go? And it wasn't until a while later that I realized there's an advantage in keeping an eye out for the next thing that you want to do. And so that's what I want to share with you today, is not just the backwards way that I discovered this, but that you can actually take a series of steps that's going to help you find your next opportunities and be ready for them. So the theory behind this is called planned happenstance theory, and it's a theory developed by 3 psychologists and counselors, the Kathleen Mitchell, Al Levin, and Krumholtz from Stanford. And what they realized was that there are a series of things that you have control over in your life, and then there are a bunch of things you don't have control over. And so by concentrating on your ability to react to different things that happen in your life, you're able to take advantage of chance events and convert those into being able to do something new or interesting. And the 3 psychologists are actually career counselors. And what they realized was that everything they had been taught about career counseling was actually wrong, and that they needed to take an entirely new approach to it. And the idea being that when you're a kid, you don't, sit down and think to yourself, someday I'm going to be a UX designer, or someday I'm going to be a middle manager. Instead, it's a role that you come to through trial and error and through finding new things. There's a reason we're not all astronauts, right? There's an opportunity that we didn't convert there. So it helps to think instead about what are the opportunities we have and how do we act on those opportunities. So these psychologists realize that there are actually skills for creating opportunities. Skills of curiosity, persistence, flexibility, optimism, and risk-taking. And so today, let's take a look at putting those skills into action. And our goal behind all of these is that we want to generate chance events, because chance events are the spaces where you're going to find interesting new things to do in your life. If you think back to the career path that you've had, for every single new job you have or new action you've taken, you can probably think of one thing that was chance that helped you along the way. It doesn't mean that your entire career is due to luck. What it means is that you're able to take those lucky moments and turn them into something that benefits you. So the ways that we generate and act on these chance reflects, we're going to first reflect on the things that we want and don't want, then connect with the people who can help us with each of these things, and then figure out ways to take action. So in the reflection, when we're thinking about reflection, we're not predicting the future. So last year, Americans spent $1.8 billion on unused gym memberships. It's because millions upon millions of people thought they would go to the gym and never did. And it's why in UX research, we don't ask people about what they're going to do in the future. Instead, we try to understand potential future behavior from past actions or past activities. And so in the same way, we're not going to try to make predictions about ourselves. Instead, we're going to reflect on the things that we do or don't want from our lives. So if you're Superman, that means finding your kryptonite or finding your sun. And for me, in my own reflection on my career, it means finding the things that first drain me. And you want to be pretty specific about this. So for me, as I reflected most recently in my last 12 months at my job, I realized there were 3 things that were making my job really tough and that I didn't really enjoy. And one of those at my current job is territorialism. It means that when teams aren't ready to collaborate, or even after persistent interaction aren't collaboration minded, I find it draining. From my time in search, I realized that I really did not like choosing the colors of things. I know this is a shortcoming for me as a designer, but it's why I love design systems. It means that I can rely on great color choices and I don't have to make them for myself. If you ask me to select the amount of elevation that I should have on a button, I'm great at that. But if you want me to tell you the exact text code for the gray in the elevation, I should find a different designer. And last, I hate putting on a smile. This is actually something I learned when I worked at Starbucks, is that when I start work at 5 o'clock in the morning, that I was efficient and excellent at my job, but that people wanted somebody to be emotionally available to them in a way I didn't want to be. So it was important for me to know, even in those early roles, there were things that worked for me and things that didn't. You can think about drains too as things that your manager has to talk to you about over and over again and that you're not resolving. Then there are energizers, and this one is the one that sometimes I have more trouble with. So thinking through the energizers for me, most recently, it was shifting my team to service design. When I worked at MySpace, it was working on workflows for Lady Gaga's team. And then when I worked at the drive-thru in Taco Bell, when I was much younger, it was figuring out the setup to optimize the drive-thru process so I could do things like make drinks as quickly as possible, or figuring out what kind of change people needed really fast. What I want to recommend is when you're thinking about the things that energize you, that you don't just put down, working on stuff for Lady Gaga, because while it's nice to have goals that mention pop stars, what's better is to know what that goal actually means to you. So breaking that down into a different way is that shifting my team towards service design meant that I really enjoyed breaking down the boundaries of what UX was and not being restricted to just designing interfaces, but really thinking about how we impacted larger components of a product. With working on these workflows for Lady Gaga's team, it turns out that the version of MySpace I was working on hadn't been optimized for the publicity teams of major stars. And so I had to figure out how I was going to make something complicated really tractable. And then even in this example from Taco Bell, it was really that I was able to think about optimization and workflows and make those work for other people too. And so taking all of these things that are different strengths and knowing the things that drain me helps me think about the next step in putting together this unplan for my career, right? And the thing that's really important to keep in mind here is that this is just a V1, all right? It's a sketch of the things that you approximately don't want and the things that you do want. So it's not set in stone and you don't have to stick with it forever. So the next stage in figuring out the things that you want is connecting with other people. I don't mean this in the way of asking people for jobs, but instead it's figuring out who is on your team. And a really effective way for thinking about who's going to be on your team comes from Minda Hart's, author of Memo. And I kind of wish she'd been my career advisor at work, because when I had to do my first career plan at Google, I was asked, instead of thinking about who are people who can help me move into the next stage of my career, I was asked, who are 2 to 3 people at work you admire? And this question was really uncomfortable for me because there wasn't anybody at work I admired. I was brand new to Google. I didn't know anybody. And I didn't know anyone well enough to know if they had the same values and the same system of thinking, or even a life that was in any way similar to mine. And so then my manager asked me, well, who's somebody outside of work who you admire? And my mind was blank. So I said Gandhi, because I was a person I admire. His work is long lasting and has significant impact, and his eventual goal towards freedom and peace. But that doesn't help you really figure out your next step in your career. What I wish my manager had done instead was I wish they had asked me, who do I think could help me? And the quite interesting thing about this question is that you also get to ask, who do you think you could help, or who could you do something for? So if I think about who gets to help me, I can reflect on multiple touch points throughout my career where a person, without even realizing it, or maybe realizing it in a huge way, helped me out. That's the reason why it's important to think about what this team looks like and who are these people who are going to help you. So when I was working at an ad agency, I knew that I wanted to work on product, and I was really tired of trying to sell things that other people built instead of figuring out the thing for myself. And I mentioned this to Christina Woodkey, a product manager I'd met when we were taking a food writing class together. And I didn't just mention it to her once, it was pretty much every time we went out to dinner. And eventually she ended up getting me an interview at MySpace so that I could join the design team there. It was the way I was able to make the transition from an agency into product, and the way I was able to work on something for millions of people and think about technology in a different way. When I was laid off from MySpace, I was really fortunate that a Google recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn. And as soon as I realized I had an interview, as soon as a recruiter reached out to me, I ended up reaching out to Braden Cowitz. Now, he and I had been at a sketch camp together in San Francisco, and we weren't friends. He was just a person I kind of knew from the internet. But I sent him an email, and actually I think I DM'd him, and let him know that I had an interview at Google. And then I asked him if I could come out for lunch. And the nice thing about going out for lunch with Braden wasn't just that when I went to Google for my interview, it wasn't the first time I'd ever been there. But when I went to Google when I had my design exercise at Google, my design exercise was about Googlers choosing lunch. And so I automatically had an advantage, and I was able to use that relationship that I had to learn something and turn it into an opportunity, and to help me with thinking about how I design something for Googlers. And last, Kimberly Harvey, who's a voice designer at Google right now. When I was looking for my most recent role, I was interested in joining the voice interface team at Google. And so I'd been talking to a bunch of people who worked in different parts of the team and asking about their experiences. And as I chatted with her, she mentioned that one of her friends worked in the medical brain area of Google. And I have to admit, I didn't even know that we were doing medical research at the time. It was because of a lunchtime conversation with her and catching up about goals and things we were each interested in, that she let me know about this opportunity, and I was able to look up the team and eventually join it. These are each people who played different levels of roles, right? Christina helped me get that interview. Braden had me out for lunch. Kimberly simply mentioned that a team was looking for another person. But each of these people helped me along my way. And so what will help you is to think about your own teams. Like, who is on this internal team, your workplace team, and who is on your external team? And while I appreciate Minda Hart's top 8, which is a MySpace reference, I like to think about 5 types of people for each group. On your internal team, you're going to want to think about your manager and the role that they play. Think about the peers that you're going to interact with. Think about the people you mentor, but also think about any of your mentees and what relationship you might have with them. And you're going to want to think about cross-functional peers as well. And on your external team, it's your friends, it's your ex-colleagues, it's people from meetups like this one, from professional organizations like IXDA or BayChi, and from your community at large. And so thinking through each of these groups is going to help you figure out who are the people you should stay in touch with, and who are the people who can help you generate chance events. Because the unfortunate fact of the matter is that the best way to generate these chance events that lead to something more interesting or bigger in your life, or just something different that is actually something you want to do, those opportunities are going to most likely come from other people. And so you'll have to put people at the center of it. And it's a lot easier when you just make a list of all of those people as well, and then figure out what you're going to do next. You might be saying to yourself, how am I going to talk to other people when there's a pandemic going on? So the first step is recognizing that it's hard, and then thinking through the structures you already have at work. So what are the one-on-ones you have? What are the team meetings? Are there lunches people get, or can you set up a lunch? And then thinking about the other things that you can be a part of. For example, like this meetup. There are a host of areas where you can interact with other people, including the South Bay UX Slack. And so those spaces are all spaces where you can generate and keep up with relationships. And it's really important to have these external relationships, because your manager isn't actually your career coach. As a manager, I'm thinking about the set of work and opportunities that I have ahead of me, and the things that I want my team to be able to accomplish in the next year or two. And those don't always match up with the things that you might want for yourself. And so it's important to have that outside group of people who can help think about how to be strategic in your career. So you've got a list of things that you don't like, a list of things you do like. You have a list of people internal to your organization, so you folks at your company or your school, and you have a list of people who are external to it. So now it's time to make that action plan, not a 5-year plan, just a plan for what's next. So taking a look at this team, what we want to do is think about how we're going to get in touch with them. So we're going to put into use those different skills like curiosity, persistence, flexibility, optimism, our capacity for risk-taking are all going to come into effect here. And we're going to start a conversation, not picking up a phone, because literally nobody's going to answer it, but it could be texting. And you're going to start a way of talking to people so that they know the thing you're looking for next. So just think about, you already have this list of what you want. And what I really like actually about thinking through this list is that you can really think about how you're going to A, highlight the things you've been working on and enjoyed, but B, ask people if there's anything that you can help them with or anything that they're looking for. It doesn't always have to be starting a conversation though. Sometimes it can be taking the lead on a project. Sometimes it can also look like applying for a new role. And these are all forms of taking action. The thing that's most important about this action sequence is that you're going to first generate that chance or that opportunity. And so you're going to prepare yourself for it. And then once somebody responds to your email, responds to your chat, talks to you, lets you know about something interesting that's happening in a side conversation, you're going to have to be alert for opportunity. And then the last and important part of it is to convert it into this next action or next step. So one example of this was when I'd joined the security and privacy team at Google, I was really fortunate to work on our projects around GDPR, and was really lucky to have a great launch pretty early on in my work there. What I wasn't lucky about was that I thought there would be a leadership opportunity in the role, and it seemed like the team was in the right shape for that. But right after I joined, another person at the same level as me was promoted to be my manager. And while they're an expert in security and privacy, they were brand new to Google, and I knew that they wouldn't be able to help me with my career. And so that's when I let myself be open to finding a new role. I joined security and privacy because I was looking for something really stable that wouldn't go away, that would capitalize on my strengths of thinking about workflows and optimization, but also had, could stick around and not disappear the way my job at Fiverr did. And what happened instead was that one day I was riding the bus home and I heard another coworker talking about an interesting project. And instead of wearing my headphones every day, I'd been starting to talk to people more. And I realized that their product concept for their startup was interesting, but that the design needed a lot of work and they hadn't really thought through how to pitch it to Google's investment team. And so what I did was I went home, I designed a few slides to show what I thought their pitch deck should look like instead, and joined the project as a co-founder. It was that generating that opportunity, then being open to the opportunity as it was happening, and then converting it by taking that next action of doing that design work. The thing I realized over the last several years, and ever since I had that horrifying career conversation where I invoked both flying cars and Gandhi, was that the goals I've set for myself are always my limits. They haven't helped me see things in a bigger way. Instead, I realized that we work in an area and an industry that is changing so rapidly that anything you think possible for yourself now might be too small for yourself in the future. So thank you.
All right, thank you. That was awesome. We do have some questions for you. Let me put us up split screen here. I'm going to flash a couple of questions up on the screen.
Okay, I can see the TikTok about refried beans at Taco Bell was also true in 1996. They were hydrated.
So Lynn is asking, how do I stay connected with people I met online? The first conversation was easy to set up, but not sure how frequent I should follow up and ask for help.
Hey, thanks for the question, Lynn. So the one part of this is thinking through what the level of relationship is and how well you know somebody, right? And thinking about that not every part in a conversation you have has to have a response from someone. So it might be that if they've offered you some help and it's helped you out, that you just let them know without expecting a response from that person. You can even say no response required. What I like to do is thinking about people who are like sort of distant in my network is actually set up like a quarterly calendar reminder to let myself know like, hey, I should get in touch with this person. And I found that to be pretty helpful in terms of, thinking about, who I want to be in touch with, who I want to let know what's going on in my life and how often I should reach out. It's a similar idea to sending out a holiday card or getting in touch with people when an important event happens in your life. And so it depends on the situation. Feel free to ask me for more details. You could reach out if there's something else you want to discuss.
Thank you. While we're waiting for other questions, please type your questions into the chat and we'll flash them up on the screen here. I did want to ask you a question about mentors and mentees. You mentioned both of them. Can you talk about what you should expect to get out of a mentor relationship, and conversely, what should you expect to get out of a mentee relationship?
Yeah, so the mentor relationship is I'm looking for somebody who has enough experience to be able to offer a different perspective on the challenges that I'm facing. Right, so that's what I'm looking for in a mentor. And what I've found is that as I've grown in my career, I've actually had to find more and more peer mentors. So instead of just thinking about how do I find somebody at the level I am at +1, instead thinking about, hey, who are the other peers in my position who might have a different take or a different perspective. Laura Hogan calls this assembling your manager Voltron. And so thinking about that peer group that you can put together. In terms of the mentee relationship, there are people I mentor formally and informally. So what's nice about Google is that we have an internal mentor matching system, which is basically people come in and say, I'll be a mentor, and then everyone can look through the list and sign up to be mentored by somebody. And what I usually do there is I meet with people on through that program on a, since it's internal to work on a regular basis. So it might be every 2 weeks if they're going through something specific, like preparing for performance reviews. But more often it's meeting like monthly or quarterly to check in and think about the specific challenges they have and how they're working through those challenges and figuring out, different options or opportunities for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have a question from Rachel. She thanks you for giving this talk, and she's curious if you have strategies or processes for staying alert that you'd like to share. That's a good question.
So it's a real challenge for me because I'm an introvert, and being sort of out there and talking to other people can be draining, right? So going to an event or taking that risk of failure can be kind of tough. I think what's pretty important is to not relax so much as it's really letting yourself be open to what's out there. And a lot of times when we are thinking about challenges where it's like, ooh, do I know anybody at that company? And is there a specific person I can talk to? When the reality is that it's not just people at the biggest companies or the exact place you want to work right now or a premier design firm or wherever it is. It's that there might be somebody who you run into in other environments, including online, who's going to have a different perspective than you do, and is going to know that a company is hiring, that there's a new type of skill people are looking for, and that it's not always about staying alert to job opportunities, but a lot of times staying alert to different skills that you want to build or places that might be interesting to move to or other people that you would like to meet. And so it can be kind of wearying when it's constantly about finding a new job for you. And instead, it helps to think about what are the things that you want to learn next. And if there's something that piques your curiosity or you want to learn more about it or practice it, then that's an area to move into.
While we wait for other questions to roll in, I met Abby by reaching out to her. I had read her wonderful Twitter feed for a long time. She tweets rather prolifically. Can you talk about how you've used Twitter to your advantage and just any advice around social media?
I don't follow the social media rules for work, so I'm not sure how much I should say about it. I started using Twitter in 2007. So it was something where I was a blogger and a bunch of people in this blog network I was a part of started signing up for it, and I signed up for it too. And what I found is that what was really helpful is being a part of a pretty small community to start with. And so I think that's one of the things that's really tough about something like a really big Slack. So I see this with like the research ops Slack, and it's huge, right? And you constantly have new people joining. And I realized that the real conversations I want to have are in the smaller channels in Slacks. And it's something where it's like you can think about starting your own smaller channels, or you can think about people you invite into conversations or chat groups that you have with friends. And so it's what I found is that, yeah, early on, what really made it work for me was that it felt like it was with a small group of people. And then the other part of it, I think, is that it wasn't until pretty recently that my parents started following me. And I have to say that my Twitter use has changed a little bit since my parents started following me on it. So hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
That's awesome. Okay. Oh man. I apologize if I get your name wrong. Chidinma asks, do you have any advice for people transitioning to UX type roles who have done the learning work but aren't experienced on paper? That's a good question.
Oh yeah. So from mine, it was that I wasn't the job ad I'd answered when I first went into UX wasn't for a UX role. It was at a teacher certification agency, and also UX wasn't a thing people talked about. But it was a situation where I was actually interviewing for one job where I was going to be sort of overseeing the paperwork for people who were applying for teacher certification. And during the job interview, I talked about the things that I really loved, which was building websites. And it just so happened that the person who's interviewing me actually is from a computer science background, right? So there's nothing wrong with taking a job that's not in UX and then figuring out how you're going to transition that role. But the other thing to do is think about like what are the organizations that have recognized they need UX talent, but haven't figured out how to get people into place. So you might be thinking about what are places more local to you. I would just say a lot of times people give the advice to volunteer, but you really have to think about whether or not you have the financial constraints or time constraints for that, right? And if it's something you want to put your time into. And the other part of it is thinking about how you portray your work on a portfolio. So If you've done the learning work, then that should include projects where you interviewed people, that you've created applications. And if you haven't done that, then you might want to think about things like volunteer hackathons, where it's not so much making something for a company, but thinking about what kinds of public service organizations might be out there, or spaces where you can not only try to build your skills into something that you can show off to other people, especially if the previous work was private, but also that gives you a chance to meet other folks.
That was awesome. Thank you. Logan has a question. He asks, how did you overcome the feeling assigned by society or organic that you need to respect your leaders when you struggled to do so or had no reason to do so versus becoming your own leader?
Oh, I think that really reflecting on the different managers I've had, the toughest time I had was reporting to a design manager who was a great designer, but not a great manager. And I think one of the indications of it was that they were really late to or canceled all of our one-on-ones. And I realized that they didn't care about my career in the way I did or the way I needed to grow to be successful in their role. And so I think there are some situations where you realize like, oh, this person who actually gets to decide a lot of things about my career isn't helping me. And so I need to make a change. So I ended up quitting that team. But there are other times where you just simply have a difference of opinion, right? And so I think that's actually a space where just having open, transparent conversation with other leaders in the organizations I work in has been really helpful. I think that becoming your own leader, though, or being a leader in a group doesn't mean that doesn't put you into conflict with being able to respect other people.
Thank you. Mitchell asks, what advice for a recent bootcamp graduate in terms of landing the first job opportunity? Specifically, what steps can you take to be more proactive than the average job seeker?
I know a lot of it gets back to thinking about who is the person you were before and who is the person you want to be in the future, and figuring out what that looks like and how those what are those chances that you took that led you to the next place. So when you sit down for a new role, or when you think about writing a cover letter, or when you apply for your portfolio, you're going to want to have a really clear sense of your strengths and what are the places that you want to work in. A lot of times as a hiring manager, I see portfolios that reflect spaces people have done design work in, but they don't actually want to work in. And you can tell. Or when they come back to come in for an interview, you can tell that there's a mismatch there. The other things to think about, though, is in terms of being more proactive than other people is, I don't know that there's a way, I don't know that there's a way to be more proactive, right? Instead, there's just a way to think about, hey, how are you taking all the steps you can take for the next role that you want? And so that's how do you build relationships with other people? How do you give yourself a chance to be in more roles? And when you're looking at the opportunities you have for your career, there are a bunch of things you can't do anything about, right? Like I'll never play in the NBA. I live in a place that doesn't really snow, so I'm never going to be a amazing downhill skier. And I don't have the genetic potential for it either. But I also have advantages for where I live, and so that's the other part of it, is thinking about, all right, what are the advantages and disadvantages I have? And then what are the things I can actually do something about? And that's what you'll have to keep an eye on. I actually really recommend thinking through the actions that you're taking for each thing, and figuring out not like, hey, how do I ping a person 18 times on email, but how did I make sure that what I offer really and truly connects to what this organization is looking for?
I think that's great advice. Monica asked a couple of questions, but I'm going to show this one. What is the best way to discover the strengths and weaknesses of your team as a manager?
So I think there are a few different components to this. So one is having folks reflect for themselves. And so you actually want to think about the different parts of a job that people have. So you're going to want to look at what do leadership skills look like, what are the technical skills that people have, what are their collaboration skills. You know, these are all different components of a job. How technically adept are they, for example? So there are all those components, right? If you're trying to think through the strengths of your team. But I think the real challenge here is that there's, and that's what I find as a manager is, I'm not just thinking about the strengths of my team, but I have to figure out if the weaknesses are things that we want to resolve or things that I just want to toss out and not worry about anymore and not try to force people into roles that aren't right for them. And I think that's where it's really easy to struggle as a manager, right? Is that we see weaknesses. For example, a new team member joins at Google, they're not as familiar with material design, and they're going to be weaker in that area until they get ramped up and they have enough practice in designing in that design system. That's fine. Because it's this place where we can gauge progress. But if you have somebody for whom a specific type of work isn't the type of work that's right for them, or a specific type of team isn't the type of team that's right for them, but other ones are, then it's being able to think through those different areas. One of the things I really like is having a way for people to discuss their strengths with each other too. That's why we do a strengths finder on our team. And that's how we, figure out not only what are the things we're strong in, but is our team like over leveraged in a certain area, or do we have where we have one strength far too much and not another one?
Thank you. Cherry asks, do you think there will be a limit for a UX designer in career? I have heard that the design job or the internet industry is a young field.
I think there's a limit to I think design is going to change all the time. So there are already plenty of companies working on automatic design tools. So being a production designer is going to have limitations, right? What's really important, and I think I feel this way because I work in AI and I have for a while now, is it's really important to think about what are the things that human beings do that a machine can't do, and aim for those things. If the work you're doing could be done by the auto design tools in Figma, then you've got a problem.
Yeah, that's good advice. Another question about social media. How can we start building a network and presence on LinkedIn?
So I have to say that I do, our recruiters at Google have tools where they use LinkedIn. And so when I open up a new role, one of the things they do is they send me their special recruiter link, and then I look through LinkedIn, using that to look for folks who might be a good fit. So part of it is having a full and complete profile. At the same time, knowing that you just have one profile, but you might have a bunch of different, there might be a bunch of different aspects to you or a bunch of different things you want to focus on, but, knowing specifically what is it that you're aiming for can be really helpful in your next role. And that's the way you can do that is by showing more information about your past and showing the progress that you've made, and the things that you've learned or grown in. And so it's really just having that more complete profile. And then the other thing to think about is how you're going to, I should say, you've got to acknowledge that there's a very specific population on any given platform, right? So the group of people you're going to find on LinkedIn will have some overlap with the people in a Slack. It'll have some overlap with people in a Facebook group. And so you'll want to think about, hey, what are all these different groups, and what is the way I want to participate in them, and how do I want to represent myself as a professional for each one? And so it can even include, things like, hey, having a picture of yourself so the next time you see somebody in real life, sometime in late 2021, that you know who they are. And I have to say that did a bunch of research several years ago at Google and found that basically once somebody has memorized your profile picture, they can detect it even when it's as small as 18 pixels square. So think about that. How do you make yourself recognizable and make it easier for people to find you in the future?
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
You can make really tiny profile pictures.
Really small ones. Make yourself an icon. Autumn thanks you for a great session, and she's heard about a role called a UX engineer. She wants to know more about it. How do they interact with the team, and what challenges do they face versus being a product designer?
Sure. So UX engineer at Google comes in a bunch of different flavors. One of the UX engineers I work with, Ian Lee, he he had actually joined as a designer Google originally, and then eventually as the UX engineering role grew, he moved into that role. So being an UX engineer usually means that you have some sort of a background in computer science or in being a developer. And it can mean that you are doing things like figuring out interesting new interactions or ways of visualizing data, or it can mean that you are building out prototypes for systems to help teams move faster. Or it can mean that you are a person who builds the things that builds the prototyping tools that designers use, so they don't need a UX engineer to build things for them. So the UX engineer might show what's possible in a platform and give people an idea of what could be done, or might help engineering teams solve problems around visualization or UX components, or they might actually build the infrastructure and tools that make UX possible.
Shout out to our UX engineers at Google. They're some of my favorite people. We have a question from Kylie. She says, for those who struggle with risk-taking and the perceived uncertainty of an unplanned, what would you suggest to encourage others to consider and follow this method?
Sure. So the reason I suggest not trying to plan out your career is that if you take a look back, 5 years ago. So for me, 5 years ago, I was still in Google search, which was the wrong job for me. I didn't know what was the right role or what I should do next. And if I take a step back before that, to 2010, I was working at MySpace, which, was a strange place to go, right? And if I go 5 years back from that, I think I had just been fired from Guttmacher Institute because I forgot to water the plants all the time, and I was an assistant there. So there are some times when you open yourself up to risk because you forget to water the plants and you get fired. But other times, the risk taking, you can think about different levels of it, right? And so when you make a plan that sets you out for the next 5 years, it means that you're creating this narrow focus, and you don't necessarily have an idea of what's happening outside of that area. Whereas what I'm encouraging you to do is to make a plan for letting yourself be open to other things in the future. And then part of it is going to be assessing your level of risk that you're willing to undertake. So for me, I know I'm not going to move to another town. I'm probably not going to join a startup, right? I'm the breadwinner in my family. And so those things are things that I know about myself. But there are still levels of risk that we undertake all the time without acknowledging it, right? So working at any company is a risk. Deciding to join a specific kind of team is a risk. And I think we get used to things, and so we don't think there's a risk to it, but there are different levels of risk to everything we do.
That's interesting. George has a statement. I don't know if you want to elaborate on this. Thanks for being so honest and so insightful, and being a fellow introvert, connecting with people can be draining. How do you feel about that?
After you have conversations with people, make time to be by yourself so you don't have to talk to anybody else. I find that's one of the really most important things for me, is to actually create recovery time after that. It can be pretty tough if you don't get a lot of energy from other people. And I have to say, being by myself in quarantine is not particularly wonderful either. But it's more like crowds, things like conferences, big events. I often find it's like hiding in my hotel room. And so really finding a small, just like the way it's tough to think about having a conversation in 1,000-person Slack, you want to think about how do you create that smaller space to have those deeper conversations you might crave.
Monica says, please stay safe from the fire. I would say that's true for everyone here. We really hope that everyone is staying safe right now. It's a kind of a crazy year.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Abby, for your time tonight. And if people wanted to reach out to you, can they reach out to you on Twitter, or is there another channel that you would like to shout out?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on Twitter. I have a website. It's Jones, ABI, jonesabi.com, and I have a contact form on that site as well. So people are free to reach out that way. And then I'm also in different groups. So, you can always see if I'm on your nearest Slack. That's another option.
Thank you so much for speaking tonight. Everyone, remember next week we're going to have Yancey speak and continue the career series talking about new beginnings and how to view your career, specifically when we're talking about changes through a human-centered lens. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight, and we hope that you stay safe and have a great evening.